Gold is really the only place right now where I feel comfortable having something longer term in the market or in that market versus other assets.
So let's move to gold now. Where do you see the important support levels and resistance levels in the gold chart? We've really seen, gold kind of trade sideways, go back up through the $1,800 level and get kicked back down here in the last day. So where do you see those levels, Gareth?
Yeah, so gold. So we did see this big dump out in gold, right? And that was recently. What I thought was so, and here I could show it on my chart. So you had this dump out on gold, and I still remember there was so much panic out there when this was occurring. Like, oh my gosh, gold is collapsing. How low can it go? And all I was seeing was buying opportunities as gold goes down. And anytime gold dips, I just remind myself of the thesis of long-term gold holding. And it's kind of the same thesis as Bitcoin. It's just that Bitcoin's a lot more expensive, in my opinion, still, and has a lot more kind of, amateurish money in it that I do think needs to be flushed out. But eventually Bitcoin becomes the same kind of avenue to upside as gold. But bottom line is this dip occurred just as Bitcoin was breaking out above that 40,000 level, which is currently trading just under 50,000. And then what I loved about gold, which was so bullish, was within days, you recovered that entire move to the downside. And again, when I see that type of quick buyback, it screams institutions saying, okay, this is the dip on gold. It's going to go higher no matter what. I mean, these guys, again, are ones that can see things even better than I do. And they're the ones obviously picking it up down here. It wasn't, John Q. Public saying, oh, well, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin on this breakout and then buy gold back in. I mean, we know that that's not necessarily happening. So that was very bullish when I saw that. Now, having said that, you came right into this choppy sideways action. You're right back there. You're pulling back a little bit today again. This is the area that you want to see gold get through in the short term. And I can put a trend line right here on the GLD. If it can break above here, then I do still think that there's a chance to get to this breakout trend line right here, which is kind of an inverse head and shoulders pattern. And that would be the bigger breakout on gold that could send it to a price target of $2,100 by year end. But again, we've seen Palantir come in and buy 50 million in gold bars. I think that's such an interesting thing because prior it was all about companies buying Bitcoin. Now you're seeing companies saying, okay, we have to be smart. We can't just put all our eggs in Bitcoin. There's too much volatility. Let's buy some gold. Same thesis applies, printing of money. We don't want to hold too many dollars. We want to diversify out.
Absolutely. That was actually my next question, Gareth, is do you see this trend of exactly as you said, Palantir buying 50 million in gold? Is that a trend that might be starting for some of these other companies?
I absolutely think it is. Just like these companies at certain points will probably hold some Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I do think the same thing with gold. As a company, I mean, if you're a multi-billion-dollar company and now we have trillion-dollar companies, you especially a company like Apple that has so much cash on their balance sheet, you don't want to see inflation of 5 to 10% per year and basically say, okay, well, we're holding 100 billion in cash. Well, now it's only worth 95 billion. Now it's worth 90 billion. So you have to look at diversifying to keep that value of what the actual, asset is worth. Now, companies are going to recognize that without regulation in Bitcoin, it's very risky to hold Bitcoin. And they don't want to invest a lot and then see Bitcoin collapse 50% like we saw from 65 to 30,000, actually more than 50%, and then kind of be looking the fool. Now, what they will do is just like an investment firm, they're going to diversify. So I think you're going to see some firms continue to buy small positions in Bitcoin as well as gold. And it really makes sense. Again, the amount of cash that a lot of these firms hold on their balance sheet is the equivalent to solid-sized hedge funds. And they have to act smart about how they diversify, which includes buying gold as well as Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
Excellent, Gareth. What about maybe let's have a look at the SLV or GDX, some of the other metals charts here.
Sure. So check this out, right? So silver's a little bit of a concern to me right now. I think last time I was on with you, I was still concerned about it. We did see a fall off on silver. Silver got below this trend line right here. So it is in a little bit of a weaker position. Now, longer term, if you ask 5-10 years out, I love silver, but I do think there's still potential downside, potentially as low as I think around 18 or so on the SLV. And I think that might coincide with around 19 on the spot price, give or take a little bit. But I do think that there is further downside. And the thesis for this is really that you have to remember that silver has that industrial component. And again, I think on past interviews with you, we've talked about how that air pocket, I expected that air pocket in the economy. I didn't necessarily see the Delta variant coming, but it was just more that investors had saved so much money. They were spending it all at once. And then afterwards, there was going to kind of be this air pocket of demand left over where it was going to go back to a more normalized amount of spending. Silver was factoring in just kind of gangbusters. We've obviously seen that start to occur as well. So I think silver in the short term, a little bit lower. I will be waiting with all hands on deck to be a buyer if it gets down to that 19 to 18 level. And again, longer term, it's still a commodity. As the dollar dilutes, you will see silver go up quite substantially.
So before we finish out the charts here, is the trend right now in Bitcoin different than in previous bull cycles, or is it still intact the way you see it?
Yeah, so let's take a look at the Bitcoin chart. So this is a super interesting chart as I bring it up for you guys. So Bitcoin was in this range, right? We went from basically 30,000 to 40,000, chopping. We then broke out and you've seen it kind of climb up. Now, all along, I ultimately, if you ask me where this eventually will bottom out, it's probably 18 to 20,000 before it heads to 100 and then 500,000. But in the shorter term, this neckline, this is the former neckline of that head and shoulders that played out so beautifully. Remember what we were talking about the S&P earlier, how we broke down and then we were doing a retrace to what we call the scene of the crime, which was the breakdown trend line. Well, really what Bitcoin is trying to do is the same exact thing. Here was your trend line. It broke the trend line. And now it's trying to get back to that level. So I think there's upside on Bitcoin that could max out around 52, 53,000. At which point I do think you'll see another pretty dramatic drop. And I think it's important to recognize that in history, so if you look at the past big moves in Bitcoin, whether it was 2013 or 2017, it's important to recognize that Bitcoin has had these major falls during the end of that cycle, then huge bounces. And we're talking about, I think in 2013, it went fell from 1,300 to 450, then back to 1,100.
Excellent. So it's really just following previous patterns that we've seen before, right?
It is following almost to a T. It's almost scary how close it is in terms of replication. Now, everyone says, well, what would change your mind? So very simply, if by chance we take out 65,000, now, and then basically this is just common sense, right? So what did we not see in the previous cycles? Well, in the previous cycles, we never bounced up and then took out the high prior, right? So if we took out that 65,000, then you could say, okay, this time is different. And then the bull case comes right back in where it could go to 100,000 and beyond.
Excellent. So you and I spoke about inflation last time, Gareth. So how do you think about combating the loss of value of currency long-term, or do you just focus on trades to make up for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's so tricky because so many assets are inflated at this point. Like, for instance, recently I sold my house. I'm renting now because the real estate market to me is in another bubble. Bitcoin, I'd love to own Bitcoin. I love it long term. I got to wait for it to come in. Gold is really the only place right now where I feel comfortable having something longer term in the market or in that market versus other assets.